and welcome to my studio. I'm Jessie and this is the Knit Up and Dye podcast, episode 39, guest host. Thank you, first and foremost, to all my subscribers, both new and existing. This is really, as always, about you. Like, subscribe, tell me what you want to see, and I'll make it happen for you. Warm hellos and, as always, much love go out to Betty Ann, David, Stacy, Donna, and Shannon. Sorry, I'm using my cheat sheet as usual. All of you are wonderful. Thank you so much for the support and messages over the past week. I love getting your messages. I really appreciate you reaching out to me, and I love being able to answer your questions. Also, much love and appreciation to my test knitters. Please, if you're interested in knitting any of the upcoming patterns that I show in my podcast, don't hesitate to contact me. I'm always interested in meeting new people and having new test knitters. I don't really have limits as to how many people are allowed to test my patterns. You're all welcome. Moving on. Let's address the man in the room. This is my son, Sam. Sam is out visiting me for a little bit this summer, and Sam is joining me on today's episode because, like myself, Sam is also a knitter. And he'll be talking a little bit about the project he's working on in a little bit, but we're going to kind of plow forward with some of the regular discussion, and he is, of course, welcome to interject at any point and add his expertise, as it were, or certainly ask questions, as I always encourage questions. So let's dig in. This week, I did get a lot of knitting done. It's been kind of a mixed bag because my focus has been really on the projects and the designs that I'm working on, and trying to get them done, desperately trying to get them done, get patterns written, get tech edited, to get out to my test knitters. So, coming up very quickly is the Addicted Two Ewe scarf. Simple garter stitch scarf, starts at a small point, continues to grow for as long as you have yarn or desire for. This pattern is done being tech edited. We are only held up by getting my husband to take a photo for the actual pattern. I hope to have this out to test knitters later this week. This pattern is accomplished by holding 2 skeins of fingering weight yarn together. It requires that you be able to knit, yarn over, knit 2 together, and bind off. Bind off instructions are in the pattern. This is a nice beginner pattern that's going to create really a sizable, enjoyable piece that's very flexible. And I believe anybody can do this. I really feel that this is a beginner project and something that can be significant and feel like a major accomplishment. Like I said, just holding off for a photo, and then we'll get this out to the test knitters. Certainly, if you are interested, if you're just seeing this for the first time and you'd like to hop in and be a test knitter, reach out, contact me, and I'll get the pattern out to you as well. So that's in the works. That'll be out very quickly. As many of you saw in the last episode, I was talking about the Still Addicted to You pattern. I am doing a series of these. The pattern designs are constrained in that I'm trying to use very simple beginner stitches and come up with unique patterns, something that suits everybody. I'm finding that there's a lot of creativity. The more I constrain the project, the more I limit the skills that are necessary to do it, the more fun I'm having with it, and the more shapes and textures are coming out of it. So, Still Addicted to You is also a held 2 together project, just as a stash buster, so that you can use fingering weight yarns up and enjoy them. I know I have a huge collection of them. I'm sure many of you do as well. It's an opportunity to use them on something other than socks, and on something that consumes yardage and makes a sizable piece without being a lot of stitches. By holding 2 together, you get new colors, new textures, and you get to really experience the yarns, but not slog through fingering weight. When you hold 2 together, it goes up to a double knit weight. And you can use, I'm using size 7 needles on these, and as you can tell, I'm knocking them out pretty quick. Generally, this is my car knitting, and sometimes it is my knitting on the sofa. Generally, I'm doing these in under 3 weeks, and I work a full-time job with a heavy commute, so we're not talking about huge dedication to time knitting. I'm loving them. I'm loving them. So this one works on the same sort of principle, where it has a very small cast on, and it grows and grows and grows for as long as you have yarn or want length for. This one has a slip stitch in it, in which you are slipping on one row every so many stitches with the yarn held to the front, to your facing work. And it creates these columns of knit stitches. There's the texture for you. I'm going to try and block both of our faces so the camera can pick up the actual texture. There we go. And the wrong side texture is interesting as well. It creates almost a waffling texture. I really enjoyed knitting this. I think it's fun. I like the texture. I like that it's very different on both sides, so that really whichever side is exposed is interesting. You can expose one side, both sides, either, whatever suits your fancy. But I found that just a plain bind off wasn't suiting me. I didn't like just a flat square bind off on this particular one, so I had a little bit of fun. And I made a knitted fringe bind off. This looks so much more complicated than it is. All of the instructions are going to be in the pattern. If you can knit a cast on and you can work a bind off, you can make this fun flouncy fringe bind off. And you can make your fringe longer, shorter. You can just do a square bind off if that's your option. Both a square bind off that just binds off the end and finishes the triangle, or the fringe will be included in the pattern, so you have choices. You can do whichever strikes your fancy. This pattern has not been blocked yet. Like I said, I just finished this one. You can see I still have the tails. I need to weave in my tails, and I need to block this. When I block this, I'll be pulling that fringe out so it's straight. Right now it's all just kinky and wild. If you like it kinky and wild, leave it. I'm going to be pulling mine out straight just to get the full drape, as well as pulling out the scarf when I block it to really expand its length, its width, and get its full drape. Because of the slip stitches, this one's a little bit firmer than, say, just the straight garter stitch one. The texture is different. It's what appeals to you. This one, again, had been worked with one of Shannon Shaw's yarns. It was a colorway called Snow, lovely fingering weight, as well as my Naked Disco Monkey yarn. I'll have the yarn information again listed for you. I found with the texture of this one that I preferred to have two yarns that were really compatible with each other, really complementary of each other. I didn't want a high contrast in this design, and I didn't want a lot of busy noise in this design for the yarns. Certainly, you choose yarns that make you happy, you do whatever you want. But this one is written. We're just going through the tech edit process on this now. I need to get it blocked. This one will get photoed up as well. If you're interested in test knitting this one, contact me. It's coming up soon. It'll probably follow, I dare say, 2 weeks after this one goes out, which is next week, so 3 weeks from now we'll have this one ready for testing. As part of the series, of course, the series marches on and more designs come from it, and I have been working this week on Wildly Addicted to You. Wildly Addicted to You goes back very firmly to the very strict knit, yarn over, knit two together structure that I did before. There will be a bind off on it, obviously, but not until the end. It's not going to be like the sawtooth from Addicted to You. And in this particular project, I'm using highly contrasting yarns just for the noise and the fun of it. Wildly Addicted to You should be wild. It should be fun. This particular pattern is doing an awesome zigzag. Very excited about this. Again, this can be achieved simply with knit, yarn over, knit two together, and it just zigs and zags its way around. It is going to be longer because of its narrow width, and you're going to be able to wrap this around you 2-3 times and have a really interesting hanging tail on either side of your scarf. Perfect men, women, kids, whoever. I think it's fun. I love the yarns I'm working with. I'm really excited about the colors that are popping out of this. For the yarns, I'm using Malabrigo Sock. This is approximately 440 yards, over 100 grams. And this particular colorway is their 809 Solace. It is a stunning teal with blues in it. It really ranges from a yellow-green down to a blue, navy teal. Really pretty colors, really enjoyable. And I liked this really in combination with the scribble yarn I showed you guys last week. That is my scribble yarn. I'm calling it Sunday Funnies. It is a wild bright combination of just about every color in the rainbow on a white base, and together they're making this beautiful harmonious noise of color that I just love. I really am excited about how the green made the other colors pop. I originally thought I wanted to do this with black as its contrast, but when I held the green up to it, I fell in love. I had to do it with the green. The black just made the white pop, and you didn't see the colors so much, whereas the green, because of its contrast against yellow, against red, against orange, made those colors really stand up. The blues and the greens in here kind of tuck away, but they're made up for with this. And the white just makes an interesting comparative point for the other colors to stand up against. I'm loving it. I'm excited about it. I hope you guys love it too. This one is probably, if I had to guess, I'm another 3 weeks, 4 weeks out before being ready to even discuss aiming for test knitters. But we're getting there. We're getting there fast. And I cast this on, did I cast this on last night? So it's growing very quickly. I guess it was yesterday afternoon I cast it on. So I've got maybe 3-4 hours of knitting on this, maybe. And already you can see I'm better part of a fifth of the way in. 15-hour scarf, big, long, crazy, fun, zigzag. I'm good with that. I think that's a winner. I can imagine myself making a lot of these and gifting a lot of them out. So that's the status for the Addicted to You series. Let's get this tucked. What else have I been working on? Because that's just not enough. I have been back into my How to Eat an Elephant blanket. I've talked to you guys before about how I have this bizarre idea that I think it's like 524 squares, or I don't even remember the number off the top of my head, that I want, to accomplish for this blanket in order to get the size that I envision. And how when I don't actively work on it, the timeline to when it's going to be done becomes ridiculous. It spans out to like 54 years or some nonsense like that. And I'd like to finish it in this lifetime. I think it's really beautiful, and I would really like to enjoy it more than just on my lap while I'm knitting it. I'd like to be able to take a nap under it while I can still hear and see. So I have been digging back into it. I was on this pink square here. I had it about halfway done last time I talked to you guys. In this past week, I've managed to tack on 2 more squares, finish the pink, and tack on 2 more squares. Really, this is not a square a day that I had hoped to be keeping a pace with, but I'm on vacation this week, and there's a lot of nice sofa time sitting around doing some knitting, and I hope to crack off a few extra squares and see if I can't get a little bit caught up on my overall progress goals. In addition to that, let's see, my Dark Hero socks parked. My focus has been on getting those scarves teched out, getting the samples knit so that I have them ready for my test knitter so I can get those patterns released. The Dark Hero socks, just parked, set aside. The only other project that I really wanted to be working on was my sweater. Notice I used past tense. So I dyed up this yarn. I'm really thrilled with how the yarn came out. This is my BFL base. It's huge. It's 150 gram skein of BFL, 100% BFL, and it's a fingering weight. I did it in my favorite colorway of all my colorways. It's called Heirloom Tomato. It is this beautiful orange that has golds and corals and deep reds. It's just, I love this color, and I know it's a very flattering color on me, so I was excited to knit a sweater in this. And I dyed up a mess of it. Obviously I've got it all caked, ready for swatching, which I did. I have my tiny swatch here. Yes, I know, you're supposed to knit a sizable swatch. But I got into it and very quickly felt like the material that I was making was thinner than I wanted. It's not too thin for a fingering weight sweater, not at all. Don't misunderstand me. But when I looked at the pattern that I had purchased, sorry, I'm rifling around here. When I looked at the pattern that I had purchased and I looked at the pictures of it, I became acutely aware very, very quickly that the fabric I was creating and the fabric that was featured were very different fabrics. And that can be the content of the fiber, but in this particular case it was very apparent it was the weight of the material that I was creating. I looked at it with my husband, we looked at the swatch that I was creating, and he was like, yeah, that's thin, you're always going to have to wear something under it. I thought you wanted something more flexible. I do, I want something more flexible. I want to be able to layer it, but I don't want to have to layer it. So I opted to go down a needle size and see if that was going to dense it up enough that it wasn't so obviously so thin. This is before I really took a look at this and thought about the fabrics. And still, it's a nice fabric. I like it. I love the color. I love the color. But I'm not content with this fabric compared to this fabric. And that's where I was getting hung up. So I looked really closely at the pattern, the pictures really, and saw the difference in the fabrics between what was photoed and what I was getting. And then I got on Ravelry and looked at some of the other projects, and the other projects were very similar weighted fabrics. And I came back to my pattern and I compared the yarn again because I had yardage in my head, and I looked at the pattern on Ravelry and it says fingering weight. And I thought, well, maybe it's a heavy fingering. Something's not jiving here. And then I looked at the put up on the yarn that she has listed here. And the yarn that's listed here is 440 yards for 120 grams. This is 439 yards per 100 grams. Very different. That 20 gram difference is a weight difference in the actual fiber you're working with. And that weight difference moves this project up to requiring a sport weight yarn, not a fingering. So I sat down and I did all the maths. All the maths indicate that this is definitely knit with a sport weight. When I started to look at the other projects on Ravelry that had been completed by other knitters, indeed they had used sport weight yarns, not the fingering that she was talking about. She has the pattern listed as being fingering. She has the yarn here listed as fingering. It's a sport weight yarn. So then I played with numbers and determined, what if I held two lines of this together? I'm having a great time holding two skeins together. Why not just continue? When I did the math for that, I found that two fingering weights held together is definitively DK, and it is going to be heavier than the sport weight that the sweater requires. Fail, not going to work. I can adjust this, I can match a pattern size to the gauge I'm getting, and I can complete this sweater. Absolutely, not a problem. Go up a couple sizes, it's all good. And get an end result, get a sweater. But I really love the weight of this look. I love the fabric of this look, and that means I have to use a compatible yarn. I haven't got a compatible yarn. This makes me fussy. I had about a 2-hour fit yesterday fussing over this. I wanted so badly to use this yarn, this color for this project. Just not going to happen. So, in my husband's infinite wisdom, in his male logic, he said, well, just order some yarn in and dye it again. Of course, well that's the easy answer. I'm not scheduled to place another order in the very near future. It is a sweater. I am going to need several months to get it done. I do have events coming up this fall that I want it done for. I'm going to shelve this. And I'm going to shelve it for when I place that order, when I can get a sport weight in, and when I can dye it up. So I have this yarn. I want to make something with this yarn. I have this pattern. I want to make something with that yarn. This goes on the shelf, and I go back to searching. I have not really had an opportunity yet to sit down and go through Ravelry again. I had picked out a bunch of other sweaters that I liked. This is the one I fell in love with. This is the one I purchased. But I still have a whole bunch of favorites that I added to my favorites list on Ravelry that were fingering. And I'm doing math this time before I just assume that when they say fingering, it's fingering. And I'm going to find a fingering weight pattern that I like, that will be gorgeous in this, and I'm going to purchase that, or maybe it'll be free, we'll see, and get cracking on this, because otherwise that sweater's not going to be done for fall. So, my square of disappointment is complete. Once I'm done with actually finding a sweater, seeing if it's this needle size that I've already used, and just verifying gauge, this is all going to get ripped out, and this will be going into my How to Eat an Elephant blanket as a permanent reminder of the time that yarn was misreported on a pattern. It's frustrating. But lessons were learned, and if any of you out there are interested in learning a little bit about how I calculated using the maths, the weights of the yarn to figure out what weight was actually being used, feel free to contact me, and I'll happily send you an email with discussion on that. That may be something for a future podcast episode where I show you a little bit about the maths on how to calculate these. And really, it's a simple algebraic equation, which is cross multiply and divide. You have a fraction, which is yardage over grams, against yardage over grams, and you can calculate out. Anyway, so moving on. We have discussed all of my knitting this week. Let's discuss yours.
This is from Dye Monkey Yarns. It is a Salsa Monkey base, worsted weight yarn with 100% merino, 100 grams over 218 yards. The color is Don't Blink, which is available exclusively at Unwound in La Crosse, Wisconsin, opening August 1st.
Yay! And what project are you knitting with that yarn?
This is the Peaks and Pints Hat. That, I don't know if you can see it that well. Pattern's just starting to come out for me. It's a really interesting pattern to work with. Changes needle size on the brim, size 4 US needle to size 5. So that was a new thing to do for me. Working with metal real grade needles, so very different from what I'm used to.
Now, what type of needles have you used before?
Usually metal. I've worked with bamboo before. Definitely nothing below 5. So this is smaller than what I'm used to. I'm used to really 6s and 7s, maybe 8s, but it's different feel. It's funner. It's better to do. Gives you a more structured pattern. It's fun to look at, fun to see how it comes out in the end.
Cool.
But
So you're enjoying the project.
I am, yeah.
Can you hand me the sample?
I can.
Perfect. So the pattern he's working on, he chose. I had a bunch of patterns lying around, a bunch of hats lying around. Sam said that he'd like to knit a hat while he was out visiting. And so I pulled, 4 or 5 samples out. And he selected this from my samples pile. This is one of my patterns. It is available on Ravelry. Like he said, this is the Peaks and Pints hat. And it is a textured hat pattern. Try and block both of our faces, get really close to you so that the camera can focus. There you go. And it is just achieved through knit and purl. It has a garter brim on it. Like he said, it's worked on a 4 for the brim to kind of tighten around the forehead before it opens up to a 5. And the needle size is smaller for a worsted weight on purpose to create that denser fabric for hat to keep you warm. The pattern does offer this cute little braid on the top just as an accent point. Not something you have to do, obviously. And it does have a really tight reduction on top to create kind of this star point top on it. That's a little bit gathered just as a style option. Knit in the round like he's doing. And he's cracking on it. He started
3 days ago.
Has it been 3 days?
It's been 3 days.
You started it Friday night? Wow. And he's up just about through the first pattern repeat on the actual body of the hat. So he's up to almost here on it. So really he's only got 2 more repeats before he closes the hat off. I fully expect he's going to get it done this week, you think?
Oh yeah.
And what are your plans going forward? Do you think you'll do the braid?
I don't know if I'm going to do the braid. It's kind of playing it by ear for that one. But after this hat, we do have a second skein of this yarn to do a second one. These are kind of him and her hats together. So that'll be interesting to do. This one will be on my own. So that'll be even more interesting to do, and we'll see how that turns out.
We'll have to get you some needles. He's borrowing some needles right now. He worked the 4 on a set of...
The interchangeable ones?
Yeah, it's an old set of interchangeables I have. They're I think it's Boyd, that are fabulous beginner needles. Absolutely. The cord is nice and stiff on it, firm to hold that circle open for you. The needle is a screw interchangeable that has the pinhole in it, which is fabulous if you're working lifelines because you can just throw a piece of dental floss through that hole, knit around that circle, and that dental floss has naturally gone through and laced through your stitches and created that lifeline for you. I don't use them anymore because for my particular knitting action, I would unscrew the needle. You can only tighten them down so far before they start to damage. They are an inexpensive, lightweight aluminum, and if you over tighten them, they will actually split on the screw casing, and I have a size 5 that's damaged, which I'm not really happy about because damaged needles are sad. That's just sad. So I had the 4 available for him. My other set of 5s, because I have 2 sets of these interchangeables, I don't know where they are. I actually need to do some pile of shame diving to find the project that the interchangeable 5s are on. In the meantime, though, he needed a 5 in order to work on this. Craft store's already closed. I went through my other needles and I found a set of Chai Gu 5s that are the right size for the project. It's a short circular. I think it's a 20-inch circular, if I remember correctly, 16 or 20-inch circular. So he has gone from working on an interchangeable, inexpensive aluminum with a very firm cable to a higher end metal fixed circular that is designed for speed. It is it's a lace point. They're sharper. It's a lighter metal overall, and the cable is far more flexible than the cable from the interchangeable set. So it's been a very different hand feel for him and a very different experience for him working with them. Do you have any comments on the differences?
I thought it was hard to transition to these at first. They're smoother, easier to slip fingers and stitches on, but it takes some getting used to at first. But after a while you start to get used to it and it starts to feel comfortable again. And it makes knitting faster if you know how to knit the right way. That was a interesting part for this. I had to learn some better ways to knit so that I could better knit with these needles. Going from pushing the needle back with my finger to wrapping yarn the right way and not pushing the needles to move the stitches. So, interesting new ways to knit.
So, I'm always telling you guys that there's not a wrong way to do anything. If you're accomplishing a fabric, if you're completing a project, if you're happy doing it, it's not wrong, it's different. However, when your knitting is causing you pain, or it is obstructing you from being happy or completing the project with ease, then there's room for improvement. We're not going to call it wrong, we're going to say there's room for improvement. One of the comments that Sam made to me while he was working on the initial brim was that he was getting to the point with his knitting that he needed a thimble. That's wrong. That's just wrong. If you're knitting and your fingertips are hurting you because you are applying pressure to points with your fingertips, please stop. I don't want your knitting to be painful, ever. This is supposed to bring you joy. This is supposed to be relaxing. It's supposed to be fun. And sore fingers, unless it is because you are trying to knit a sweater in 2 days for a Christmas present and you're just working so fast that you're wearing your muscles down, that's borderline acceptable hand pain. Bruising your fingertips is not acceptable hand pain. And so we looked at the knitting technique that was in process, and I observed that he was pushing with his left index finger to move his working needle back out of a stitch. A nudge makes sense, but doing all the work with that left index finger instead of pulling the needle back with your right hand was causing him actual bruising on his fingertips. So we made some minor adjustments to his overall technique so that instead of pushing, he was doing more of a nudge and he was pulling more with that right hand to move the working needle. Ultimately, you want to balance the workload on both hands as much as possible to prevent that multi-injury. You don't want to overuse one hand more than the other. If you're going to overuse your hands, do it equally. But really, to parse the work out over both hands evenly is the goal. That's why there's 2 needles. Otherwise, we'd use one and it would be crochet. But the working needle is called the working needle for a reason. It's the one that does all the work. And in this particular case, instead of having a working needle, he had a working hand. So we've slightly tweaked his technique. Is the pressure off the finger better?
Yes, it feels so much better. I'm not bruising my finger, it feels smoother, it's easier to bring the needle in and out, and makes it faster. So, good. Very much improved.
And because this was already speeding up his technique, because he was already moving to a needle that was a faster needle, I took the time to also look at his overall technique. Like myself, he's an English knitter, which means he's a thrower. He's that way because I taught him that way. Had I taught him continental, he'd be a continental knitter. At the time that I taught him, how many years ago?
5, maybe 4. Long time.
I'm trying to remember how old you were when you started knitting. Were you 9?
Might have been, yeah.
You were 8 or 9, yeah. That many years ago was early days of my knitting as well, taking it back up. I had really only been knitting at that point actively for probably 2004, 17, 2005, 12. I really probably only had about 6 active years under my belt, and I was only getting to the point where I was starting to teach. And so teaching him at that point was to teach him what I knew, and that was the best way to go. And what I knew and what I do is I throw. Throwing techniques, especially with children, you want to teach them something that gives them the ability to tension evenly. If you do like a Portuguese style knitting that has a pin that is self-tensioning the yarn for you, great, easy, no tensioning needs to be taught. But if you're tensioning by hand manually, to teach him to pick up the yarn, wrap, give it a tug to get that wrap on the right position on the needle at the right consistency was the easiest way to go. His skill set is surpassing that. He's getting to the point now where picking up the yarn every stitch, dropping it, working the needle again, was becoming time consumptive and tedious, versus if he could learn to finger throw. Finger throwing prevents you from having to let go of the needle, pick up the yarn, wrap the yarn around the needle, drop the yarn, pick up the needle, do the action. Instead, you remain holding the needle with that hand, and your finger is flicking the yarn around the needle tip. With the more professional needles that have more slip to them, there's less worry about dropping stitches, moving stitches. The stitches start to move the way they're supposed to, just because they're sliding back and forth through a fabric. Yes, you can drop stitches with slippery needles, absolutely. I'm even going to show you how to repair drop stitches in a little bit here. But there's an action to the fabric when you have nice smooth stitches that actually prevents them from falling off for the most part. So by him dropping the needle, he was actually setting himself up to drop more stitches, because dropping the needle allowed the needle to slide back and drop the stitches, whereas holding the needle didn't allow the needle to drop, and he could just flick the yarn around the stitch. It's also very unconsumptive. What's unconsumptive? The opposite of consumptive is?
Unconsumptive.
Unconsumptive. We're going with unconsumptive. It's a word, you understand what we mean. It's saving time. There's a word for this. It's gone. Conserving time. Streamlining his whole action. By not taking the time to drop the needle, find the yarn, wrap around, drop the yarn, grab the needle, reposition himself, finish the stitch. By simply having your hand on the stitch and flicking the yarn, you've conserved all that time. And it's making the knitting faster. So not only is it faster because of the action of the needle, because of the needle type, it's faster because he's streamlining his actions by hand. And I'm seeing a significant difference in his speed already. He did most of an open hand throw for the brim, and now he's cracking through a chart. We're very excited. That's new for you as well, isn't it?
Yeah, charts. I've never really worked with charts before. I've looked at them, I've seen what they do and all. But my first projects were not charted. So I'm using that one, which is on the website, I'm sure, with chart on the back. Very simple chart. I think it is. And it just goes round and round, simple instructions, you read it and it tells you what to do. So I thought charts was a really good way to do patterns. It's really interesting to start with. I thought it was really unique. But it really, once you know how to read a chart, if you can understand it, then you know how to do the pattern. Follow along with it. It can be time consuming. It can be more time consuming than just knitting around and around. But it gives you a really good pattern, and even simple patterns like this can look really good, even for me, which I consider myself a beginner. So I really like the charts. They give you cool, unique patterns for simple things.
Now, when you say that the charts give you cool patterns or that they're time consumptive, what takes time? Are you talking about the different stitches that are happening?
Yeah, you have to really pay attention to what you're doing. You don't want to miscount, otherwise you have to go back and fix it, which can take more time. I find myself counting all the time, and extra counting and over counting. Just because you have to pay attention. If you're not paying attention, you'll make some major mistakes that you need to fix. So it's, for this pattern specifically, it's every other row you knit around, which I find myself going through really, really fast. And then the not knit arounds are counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and then making sure, double checking, or keep going, and then I'll find that I didn't double check and I made a mistake and I have to go back and fix it. So it's not that much slower. It's just, the more time you put into it, the better it's going to be, is what I'm thinking of. So I'm putting a lot of time into making sure the pattern's right and it looks good. And it's definitely coming out really well, even though I'm taking my time doing it.
So this particular pattern has a knit purl texture pattern worked into it. And that's kind of what he's talking about, is he has never worked a pattern that has a knit purl structured texture in it. What type of other patterns have you done before? What other projects have you done before?
Scarves, other hats, done a lot of scarves. I've done, what are those called? They're not Furbies, I don't like Furbies.
Furbies?
Like little animals that are made out of yarn and have cotton and stuff inside them.
Stuffies.
Yeah, one's way over there. But it's, I've done stuff like, I've done socks too.
I'm looking to see if I can find the owl you made for me.
They're,
Where is the owl?
I have no idea.
I'm going to go find my owl.
I know the one is on the desk, but I don't know about the other one.
But that's not the one you made for me.
But I really like knitting and purling is so different than doing a sock and doing, tighter stitches on the bottom and the heel flap and all that stuff. It's so different from doing a straight pattern with knitting and purling like this, which, again, the knitting and purling makes the arrows and pinks and peaks interesting to do, interesting to learn. But
I'm not sure where the owl is that you made for me. I think I have it tucked away in like my memories box. I need to get that out. I don't know where he is. I'm all disturbed. I don't know where My son made me a little stuffed owl. He's very much like this one, and it is just a knit in the round project where you actually start with a square, and then you pick up around the square and you knit a tube, and then you seam straight across. And it makes these adorable little stuffies that you put, polyfiber and beads and stuff in to make him stand up. And I have one that you made for me last year? Or was it the year before now?
last year.
And I think I tucked it away in my memories box, I don't know. But that's what he's talking about for stuffies. You made several of them, didn't you?
I did. I made 3.
Oh, wow.
I think 3. It was either 3 or 4. I made a lot.
And you made that scarf last year. Now the scarf was different for you because instead of working back and forth narrow.
Yeah, we did it widthwise. That was interesting to do. That was a very big first.
Do you remember how many stitches were on that?
I will never forget how many stitches were on that, because I made a good amount of mistakes knitting it on my own and had to go back and recount every row. It was 267 stitches across.
That's an odd number. I wonder if perhaps...
Yeah, no, that was a mistake, yeah. I ended up letting that happen, just for ease, because I didn't know how to fix that particular mistake at the time.
Okay. And was it just knit or was it knit purl?
It was just knit.
So it was a garter.
Yes.
Widthwise. Okay. And were there any other techniques that you did on that?
There was a lot of correcting, a lot of personal changes to the design of the scarf. I didn't know how wide I wanted it to be, like lengthwise like this, widthwise like that. I didn't know how wide I wanted it, so I ended up changing that a few times. But I made a lot of mistakes along the way. Obviously I was doing it on my own, so there was bound to be mistakes happening. And it's not my first scarf, but it's, you know,
Definitely the first.
on my own project that I've really tried to finish.
So we've changed terms a couple times. The scarf was knit the lengthwise, and what he accomplished was the width of the scarf as he was knitting it. You changed colors on that, didn't you?
I did. There were 3 different colors on it, if I can remember them. Purple, blue, and green was, I think, the color scheme on it. But
And you used almost a whole skein on each.
I did. I only have maybe a yard or 2 left on each.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of yarn for that scarf.
Wow.
Really big scarf. I think the final width, not length, but width-wise, ended up being a little over 10 inches.
Oh, that's nice.
So it was really good. I very much enjoyed doing this scarf. But
Did you wear it at all?
I did. I loved wearing that scarf. It's very warm.
Oh, I bet.
Very fun to do. But like I said, there were a lot of mistakes on it. I ended up learning how to fix slip stitches on my own after a couple of days of frustration.
You also had a story about something with what was it, a Sharpie and...
Yeah, when I finished the scarf, I wanted to keep the yarn, so I don't have anything to wrap it up or do anything special to preserve it, so I ended up using a couple of different household items to build a makeshift winder. That took a couple of days. I had some really bad knots in there. It was hard. That was probably the most challenging part of the scarf, was the cleanup. I think I even wove in my own tails, so that was interesting. But yeah, it was a long project. It was fun to do.
Cool. And you've knit, let's see, I know you've knit a garter stitch widthwise, so just back and forth narrow long scarf. You knit one of those and you knit a matching hat for that.
I did. I still have that hat and I still wear it. This is going to be its replacement.
Because, is it wearing out or?
I just want to knit a new hat. I mean,
That's a great reason to knit a new hat, isn't it?
I don't really have a reason. I love my hat. I think it can be heavy sometimes, but in long winter months where I live, it's necessary.
Now you've also knit another stuffy. Because you knit Percival.
I did. Oh, that's right. Knit a wiener dog.
How big did he end up? I'm trying to remember. I don't think I had a picture of him.
Little
Is
over
he
a yard.
long?
Yeah. He was knit back and forth. That was a long project.
That's right, because we had to seam him up. And I think I have
Yeah, he was a long project. He ended up being a stuffed wiener dog. It doesn't stand up on its own, but yeah,
No,
it's
he's
right
not
there.
really just designed to. Well, she's got him standing for the pattern. So let's see if I can show the pattern without giving away anything else. This was the pattern he used. And this pattern, I hope you guys can see that. It's Percival Long Dog. This is part of the Knitted Odd Bod Bunch by Donna Wilson. It is a book collection of all these crazy little monsters and creatures. And this was a pattern that you actually followed line for line.
I did. It wasn't. I mean, I consider myself a beginner knitter, and this was really an easy project to do. Didn't require much. It was really just a pay attention, see what you're doing type of thing. Very fun to do. The outcome was very funny.
And that was, I think, your first project actually using wool, because I know you used the salsa monkey on that. We had some hand dyed that we did. Did you help me dye that yarn? I don't remember.
I did.
So
That's fun.
that was really a start to finish project for you. And that project uses, I'm cheating here, I'm scanning down through it. Make one right, make one left, knit, purl. I suspect there's some decreases in here as well.
Yeah.
Slip, knit, pass over, purl 2 together. Let's see, knit 2 together. A lot of different skills were involved in that one. And that's a nice pattern. It seems to work out. She's got it working out over just one open lay flat page. So 2 pages. And his little ears, I remember the little ears. The pattern, the dog has these little ears that just stitch on afterwards.
Probably the hardest
It's
part
adorable. Adorable. No, I remember that project. That came out really, really well.
too. Yeah. Percival has a lot of different stitches and stuff. But he wasn't hard to do. Once you get the hang of the different stitches, it's really still a beginner project. It's not an advanced thing.
I did just say, make one left, make one right, slip knit pass over, purl 2 together. Oh, it's a beginner project.
It wasn't a... Once you understand the stitches, it's a really easy and fun to do project.
It's proof that anybody can accomplish anything. And not being told, hey, this is kind of an advanced project, takes away the fear. Takes away the idea that, wait a minute, maybe this is difficult and I should be concerned about that. Shoving them in the deep end and just going, oh no, you can do that, this is how you do it. And giving them a point of reference. Anybody that you're teaching, even yourself, as long as you have instruction on how to accomplish that one stitch, nothing's hard. Nothing's hard. He thinks this is a beginner project. And really, it was a more advanced project because there were so many stitches that he had to have knowledge of in order to accomplish it. Even if that meant that he had to stop and look at the instructions for it again, in the end, he considers it easy. He accomplished it without any major difficulties because there was nothing to be afraid of. It's only sticks and string. It's only sticks and string.
And mistakes, and ripping back, and slip stitches, and all the little pains along the way.
But in the end,
it's fun. It's a good project. It's a very, very satisfying finished product. Percival is very funny. He's very funny to look at. Big, long dog.
now do you think that you are a process knitter, somebody who enjoys the action of it, and if you get a finished project, great? Or do you think of yourself as a product knitter, that it's about getting that finished object and whether or not the finished object is what you wanted?
I'm leaning more towards product,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm definitely enjoying the process, so I'm thinking both.
So balance.
Yeah. Leaning a little towards product, little bit. It's very satisfying to see the finished product. But it's fun to do, it's fun to, along the way, it's a good pastime, a good hobby.
What other benefits do you get from knitting?
I mean, it's relaxing. It's a good pastime. Being a young male knitter, it's something that I've taken question for, but nothing negative. It's almost confidence building to have your own individuality in being a knitter and doing something different and against the grain of society, I guess. Yeah, I'd say it's very confidence building for men who are confident with themselves and their knitting. I enjoy it. It's a good sitting at the TV, listening to what's happening and knitting, because I can't look up from my knitting yet. I enjoy it. It's relaxing. It's very comforting.
Now, do you have friends or classmates that know about your knitting?
I do. A few of them, yeah. Friends. I'm not giving that away to anybody yet. But people do know. People have asked me, have I knit my own hats? Have I knit my own scarves? Because I do walk into school with my hat and scarf. And I do, if anyone asks, I do answer truthfully. And I've gotten some looks for it. But again, it's nothing negative. It's nothing bad or,
There's not teasing or bullying
Yeah.
going on.
There's no putting down for it. Because no one knits in my town.
And yet there's a large shop and a mill right in his town that produces yarn.
But no one knits. Or at least no one's comfortable saying they knit. I get a lot of admiration for it, actually, which is fun and unique, I guess, on its own. Because it's a unique skill to have in my town, in my school. Because we don't have that stuff, I guess. Well, we have it as an option to do, but we have other options that people take for granted. I enjoy knitting. I think it's a really good pastime that people should do. It's a good skill to have. It keeps you warm in the winter. I kind of wish other people did it, so I had other people to talk to about it. But at the same time, I'm glad that I'm doing it against the grain. It gives me, unique individualism with it. It's really fun to turn out and see how people react to stuff like this. So
I think your experience is going to be different once you get into college. I think you're going to see some common room knitting if you end up going to a dorm. I think you may find other male knitters even. It's definitely, with the advent of Rib Magazine, which is really male focal, and with such wonderful, what do I want to call these people?
supporters,
Supporters, figureheads of it. We have Nathan Taylor, incredibly talented designer, strong advocate for male knitters. We have so many role models out there, so many other male knitters who are becoming active, who are becoming public. I find it just fascinating that ultimately knitting was a male pastime, and with the advent of war, men had ration cards for wool, and men knit their own socks and their own hats in wartime, and then it shifted with the advent of different weaponry, with the advent of different budgets, where it was women at home that were knitting supply for the military. Literally, military supply was being knit. Uniform, socks, underwear, hats, gloves, you name it. And it became a war effort to knit. That's when women really seized it up, especially here in America and England and Canada for that matter. And it really became a female pastime, whereas before it was really a male pastime. Women did it, certainly Victorian times, but that was more of a parlor trick. It was a social thing. And now it's so firmly ingrained that this is a female activity. Whereas I think it's leveling out. I think we're finally moving in this industry to balance that back out and stop these barriers, these lines that there's rules about knitting, and making it more publicly acceptable, more socially acceptable, more socially encouraged, thank you, to have unisex knitters, multiple sex knitters, as everybody should knit. Everybody should knit, and definitely for the benefits, like Sam was saying, of stress relief, relaxation, which is stress relief, changing your mind, changing your thought pattern, adding life skills, staying warm. The benefits are just numerous and wonderful. I love knitting, and certainly it's something I've tried to share, and I hope that at some point you find somebody with interest and you can pass it on and teach it. And I definitely think that the likelihood of that is going to expand as you age and as you get into college and find other like-minded people.
It's fun. So. I really enjoyed it.
Do you think you'll always knit, or do you think that this is something for now and maybe something for later?
I'm definitely knitting now. I will hope to continue to knit. Obviously, it's something that you can drop for a while, but you can pick it back up. And I think if need be, that'll be the case. But I don't want to stop knitting altogether. I think this is something good to take into later years. I mean, it really is a good pastime. If, without a book, without a phone, this is something that's really, it's good to do. It leaves you to your thoughts when you knit, or not, if you choose not to. It's, later years I hope to continue knitting. This is good hobby and skill to have.
Cool. Yay. I feel so accomplished. I've imparted something. Besides good looks. Wow. Alright, so I'm going to shift at this point. One of the things that Sam was talking about that was kind of a challenge to him was what he's referring to as slipped stitches. And a slip stitch actually is when you're moving a stitch from one needle to the other. What he's referring to is a dropped stitch. And a drop stitch is when you slip the stitch off the needles and it runs down on you, or is simply lost. You simply miss it from your needle, your stitch count around the needle, and you need to rescue it and get it back up into your stitch count so that your scarf has, from beginning to end, the same number of stitches in it. So I'm going to grab a swatch that I've knit, and I'm going to pull the camera in, and I'm going to show you what the drop stitches look like and really how to rescue them. And rescuing them is as simple as having just a crochet hook, and it's a good tool to have. Even if you never crochet, if you have only one crochet hook in your entire repertoire, it's a rescue tool for sure. And it also, if you're making cakes, is a great way to tie off that outer end so that you can use the center ball without that outer tail coming undone on you constantly. So I'm going to grab the camera and get up close and personal with you guys. Right, so here's a small swatch that I've knit for you. You'll see on one side is a stockinette stitch and on the other side is a garter stitch. Notice this is not blocked. See how this is much shorter here than this side and it's tugging that up? That's the difference blocking is going to make for your work. Your blocking is going to open that garter stitch up so that ultimately they'll be the same length and you'll be able to see the different stitches between each row. That opening happens during blocking. Blocking, of course, being the soaking, washing, and drying, sometimes pinned out to dimensions to open that work up for you. I'm going to work one more row across this, and I'm going to intentionally drop a couple stitches. I'm going to drop one on each side so that you can see the difference in bringing up garter versus bringing up stockinette. Let's actually keep it in stockinette, shall we? Alright, so I've dropped one stitch on each side, and I'm just going to tug my work a little bit to cause that stitch to run down so that we have some work to do to repair it. Now as you're working across, if you've dropped a couple stitches back, you may not see it up here on that top line. Everything looks good because everybody's friendly and close with each other. But when you look down, wait, there's a hole there. That's not what this pattern called for. Something's got to get fixed. How do we fix it? Well, running in circles and panicking is never going to be the answer. It's going to take focus. You need to identify what needs to be fixed, and you need to go after it. In this particular case, separating your stitches a little bit will help you identify where that stitch needs to be. We see here that there's a set of ladders. Ladders are the carry stitches where your stitch has been dropped. And we have one little loop right here. To begin with, we want to stop it from going any further. We don't want it to run any further than it already has. Some of the ways that you can do that are by inserting a holding stitch marker or open and close stitch marker. Even just throwing a toothpick through there will work. This is wool. Unless I tug on it, it's not going to run on its own. If you were working with, say, silk or a very slippery material, it'll run on its own and keep going. Because this is wool, it has a little bit of tooth to it. Simply tugging it open like that will generally hold it long enough for me to get over to that point to fix it. You'll want to work across to the area where that slip stitch really belongs. In this case, I just need to work over a couple stitches. And I can readily see there are the ladders, and that's where that stitch is supposed to be. Grab your crochet hook. Your loop has a right side and a twisted side. We want to make sure that each of the legs goes off to either side of the stitch. That means it's not twisted. And we want to insert our crochet hook from the front of our work into that loop toward the back of our work. That stitch isn't going to run any further. You've caught it. Next, we want to look at our ladders, and we want to identify the order of our ladders. We want to work the ladders in order from the bottom to the top. Now you can really choke your stitches back on these needles to protect anybody else from jumping off in the meantime. Grab your first ladder with your crochet hook by going under it, catch it in the hook, and draw it through that stitch. Now that may require a little bit of wiggling and twisting, but you draw it through and you have worked that stitch up one ladder rung. Just like climbing a ladder, you're going to go one rung at a time, back up to the top. And make sure you keep your ladder rungs in order. If you twist them, you're going to have another hole and you're going to want to drop back down and correct them again. Simply climb it all the way back up to the top. And because this stitch hasn't been worked, we're going to want to put it back on the left-hand needle. But how do we put it back on the left-hand needle so it's not twisted? We want to pay attention to the position of the legs of the stitch, not so much the top of the stitch. An untwisted stitch will always have its right foot forward toward you, its left foot back away from you on the needle. Load the stitch back on in that way. The right leg is closer to me, the left leg is further away from me. That stitch is now ready to be worked and has been fully rescued so that you're back to a stockinette stitch and you can't see that there was ever even a problem. Garter stitch is different. Why is garter stitch different? Garter stitch is different because you have essentially knits and purls. You have knit on both sides of the work as you are working it. You knit on one row, you turned, you knit on the next row. But the back side of a knit stitch is a purl. So that's what you're seeing. That's what these ridges are. You have knits here down in the valley, and you have purls up on the top of the ridge. When we bring this dropped stitch back up, we need to pay attention to what row is next, whether it's a knit row or a purl row, to bring it back up. Now, if you're not comfortable purling, you can correct this, by flipping your work back and forth so that you always work a knit. That is probably the easiest way to repair a garter, always working it as a knit. However, if you're really comfortable with knits and purls, you can do your entire repair from the front side by simply adjusting how your crochet hook goes into the loop that's been dropped and brought back up, working it either as a knit or a purl. For this side, everything was knit, so we inserted the crochet hook from the front to the back, and we just chained up through the ladder rungs. For this side, we have garter stitch, and we need to alternate back and forth between them. Some of them, the knit rows, we're going to go from the front to the back, but on the purl rows, we need to enter that crochet hook from the back to the front, because a purl is the opposite of a knit. First things first, work over to where the gap should be from the dropped stitch. There's my gap. Identify your drop. You got to find that loop and give it a tug. Great. Now I can see it's coming out of a bump. If it's coming out of a bump, that bump is a purl, and the next row up needs to be a knit. If it's coming out of a bump and you're working garter stitch, the next row up is a knit. So, as we worked it before, we want to make sure that the legs aren't twisted. We go from the front of the work to the back of the work. We catch the ladder rung and we draw it through. Perfect. We have our knit. Give it a little extra tug, because now we need to change how we're addressing it. Now again, like I said, because you work garter and you work knit on either side, you can work your repair on either side, and you can treat it like a knit on either side. So, I'm going to choke up my knitting on the needle so I can't drop any more stitches. I'm going to turn my work. I'm going to identify that loop, and I'm going to pull it through. Where did you go? I'm going to insert my needle from my front to the back of the work, and I'm going to pull that next loop through. It's a knit on this side, but it was a purl on this side. And when I pull that back around and give that loop a tug, you're going to see that there's that purl ridge that I was talking about. Because I knit on the opposite side, it's a purl on this side. And again, I just repeat that action. On this side it'll be a knit. I find the next ladder. I go from the front to the back. I grab the next ladder rung and I pull up through. Give it a good tug. Let go. Flip my work. Bring it around. Make sure the ladder's to the back. Insert my crochet hook from the front to the back. Pull that ladder rung through and mount it to the needle. Now, mounting to the needle from the wrong side is the same as mounting the needle from the right side, except I need to pay attention to which one's the working needle. I don't want to put this on the working needle because it needs to be worked still. The working needle will be the one that the yarn is coming out of, and therefore it needs to go on the other needle. And when I tugged that, I dropped that stitch again, so we're going to rework it, really tug it up. And again, the right leg goes forward, the left leg goes backwards, mount it onto the needle, turn your work, and continue across. It's like there was never a problem. You may see a little bit of a place where your gauge is a little thrown off. simply because we were tugging on those loops. If ever you see that where the gauge seems a little wonky because you made a correction, firmly take your work, slide it onto the needle so it's safe and it won't come off the needle. Grab the needle side, grab the end side, and massage your work. Everybody can benefit from massage, including your ewe. Ta-da! All the stitches even right out, and you can't see any of that misinformed line anymore. Same can be done by grabbing left to right and giving a wiggle. All that does is evens the tension out because you're massaging all of the tension through in different directions. That's that. Now, I'm going to come back across in the garter and I'm going to drop it one more time. Like I said, garter can be worked completely from the front or the back, and I only showed you how to work it by flipping your work back and forth. So let's go back through, drop it one more time, and let me show you how to do it from one side without flipping it back and forth. For those of you with really large projects like blankets, baby blankets that are sizable, flipping it over to rescue each stitch individually is going to become daunting and stitches will continue to travel. Let's keep this as simple as possible. Trying to get it to drop, it doesn't want to drop. Alright. There it is. I've dropped my stitch down again. And this time, quite fortuitously, I'm showing that we stopped on a knit stitch. There's not a bump under the stitch. There's an even knit stitch under the stitch. So I know the next one has to be a purl. To work a purl next, you're going to identify the next ladder and you're going to pull it forward and kind of tuck that stitch behind your work. You're going to want to again make sure that the legs are straight, they're not twisted. And you're going to insert your needle from the back of the loop to the front, go under the stitch, under the ladder, and pull it through. You've created a purl and you've worked completely from that side, so you're not having to flip your work. Pull it through enough that you've got a nice stable loop, put your thumb on it if you have to, bring your needle out, insert from the front to the back like you're going to work a knit, identify the next ladder, and draw it through. Now you've worked a knit. Again, to work a purl from the front side, there's your loop. Grab the next ladder, make sure it's truly the next ladder, bring it to the front so that your stitch is behind it. Insert your needle from the back of the loop to the front of the loop, catch that line, and bring it back through. A little bit of wiggling there, comes right through, there's your purl. Back to a knit, we go from the front to the back, under our ladder, make sure you've got the right rung, and pull it forward. One more time for a purl. I'm locking that stitch with my thumb, I'm grabbing my ladder, pulling it forward, I'm entering the stitch from the back to the front, I'm grabbing my ladder, and I'm pulling it through. Then I want to mount it to the needle, and I want to make sure that I'm putting it not on the working needle, but on the needle to be worked. Identify which needle has the yarn coming out of it, and put it on the opposite needle with the right leg of the stitch forward and the left leg of the stitch back. Again, repaired. You can't even see that there was a problem. And continue along your way. That's it. It's as easy as that. We've repaired a stockinette drop and we've repaired a garter drop from two different angles. The garter drop we repaired by flipping it back and forth, so we always worked it as a knit to carry it back up. And we also worked it from one side, working them knit and purl alternately to carry the stitch back up. Hopefully this little demonstration has been helpful to you, useful to you, and it's saving you from ripping back rows and rows and rows of knitting to fix one little stitch. Just get back to where it was, get that stitch between your two needles, drop down and rescue that one little guy. Please don't rip back unless you have to, and if you are going to rip back, insert a lifeline so that if you made a mistake, you have a new starting point that's saved that's right. Right, that's it. That's all for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Theoretically, we may have one more episode with our guest host, Sam. Really depends on activities over the next week, but certainly I hope to see you next week. Thank you for joining me, and make it a great week. Bye, guys.